Welcome to Trauma Bay. There's something quietly terrifying about the way people slowly lose themselves while trying to be loved. Not through violence, not through trauma, but through smiles, through nods, through constant agreement. A slow erosion that looks like kindness on the surface, but underneath, it's a death of the self. Most people don't wake up one day and decide to betray themselves. It starts small. A harmless yes when you wanted to say no. A compliment you didn't mean. A silence when something needed to be said. You tell yourself you're being nice, that it's better to keep the peace, that it's not worth the conflict. But something inside you knows. You're shrinking. You're trading your authenticity for approval. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. It's the version of you that you think others will accept. But Jung warned that the more you identify with this mask, the more you become alienated from your true self. You start to forget what you actually think, feel, and want. You live for other people's expectations, not your own truth. The tragedy is that this behavior is often praised. You're seen as selfless, kind, agreeable. But behind that praise is a system that benefits from your silence. Your inability to draw boundaries makes you easier to control. Your need to be liked makes you predictable. Your unwillingness to confront or disappoint others makes you convenient. But it's not just psychological. Chronic people-pleasers have higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. A study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that those who constantly suppress their own needs in relationships experience more emotional exhaustion and lower self-esteem. Your nervous system isn't fooled. It knows when you're lying to yourself. Your body feels the tension of every fake smile and every unspoken truth, and it keeps the score. You might think you're doing it to protect others, but the truth is, you're avoiding pain. The pain of rejection, the discomfort of confrontation, the fear of being seen as selfish. So instead, you overextend. You say yes too much. You over-apologize. You become the person who's always there for everyone, except yourself. This pattern usually starts in childhood. Maybe you were praised when you were obedient, or punished when you expressed anger. Maybe love felt conditional. You learned early on that being good meant being quiet. That love had to be earned by making others comfortable, even if it meant making yourself miserable. Jung said that what you repress doesn't disappear. It moves into the unconscious. It becomes part of your shadow, and the more you suppress your real feelings, the more your shadow grows. That shadow doesn't just sit there. It leaks out, through resentment, through passive aggression, through self-sabotage. You start to hate the people you're trying to please. You start to hate yourself for needing their approval. Eventually, you reach a point where you don't know who you are anymore. You've spent so long becoming what everyone else wants that your own identity feels hollow. You feel fake, even in your closest relationships. You laugh at things that aren't funny. You agree with opinions you secretly despise. You show up to places you don't want to be, and you call it kindness. But it's not kindness. It's self-abandonment. And self-abandonment, over time, turns into quiet resentment. Towards others, yes, but especially toward yourself. You start to see your reflection and feel like a stranger is looking back. Not because you've changed, but because you've disappeared. Piece by piece, in every yes that should have been no, in every laugh that wasn't real, in every moment you edited yourself just to be liked. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming truly yourself, requires facing the parts of you that are uncomfortable, rejected, even dangerous. The parts of you that don't want to please anyone, that don't want to be polite, that want to scream, to walk away, to say, "This is not okay." But those parts are buried, hidden deep, because they were never welcomed. And now, they feel threatening. To bring them to light, means risking the image you've spent a lifetime building. That image, the persona, is not evil. It has a purpose. You can't live in society without some form of it. But when the persona becomes your entire identity, when you forget that it's just a mask, that's when you suffer. That's when you start performing life instead of living it. Most people don't realize how deeply this performance runs. You ask them what they want, and they hesitate. Not because they're unsure, but because they've trained themselves not to want. They don't trust their own desires anymore. Their default setting is whatever you want. And that's dangerous, because when you don't know what you want, you become vulnerable to people who do. Manipulators, narcissists, controllers. They love people who are too polite to fight back. People pleasers often attract the very people who will use them, not out of malice, but because a dynamic is set. One gives, the other takes. And the more one gives, the more they feel used, unappreciated, invisible. But they keep giving, hoping someone will finally see them. The tragedy is, no one can see you if you're hiding behind a mask. Even if they love you, they're not loving the real you. They're loving a version you created to survive. This is why pleasing others can feel like a slow death. It doesn't hurt all at once. It's gradual. It chips away at your integrity. It makes you smile when you're actually aching. It teaches you to lie, soft lies, harmless lies, but lies nonetheless. And every time you do it, your truth dies a little more. But what's the alternative? To be cold? To be selfish? To reject everyone? Not exactly. The alternative is authenticity, not brutal honesty, not cruelty disguised as just being real, but the quiet strength to be who you are, even when it disappoints someone, even when it makes things awkward, even when it means losing approval. Because approval that requires you to betray yourself is never worth having. People might not say this out loud, but they respect those who respect themselves. The ones who don't flinch at saying no. The ones who don't offer fake compliments. The ones who don't try to be everything for everyone. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be loud. But you do have to be real. Because if you're not, life will keep rewarding your mask and punishing your truth. In therapy, there's a phrase often used with people pleasers. You're not responsible for other people's emotions. And yet, most pleasers act as if they are. They tiptoe around moods. They anticipate disappointment. They apologize for existing. But this isn't compassion. It's control. You're not protecting others. You're trying to control how they see you. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege requires risk. The risk of rejection. The risk of being misunderstood. The risk of being alone. But at least you're alone with yourself, not lost in the crowd of other people's expectations." There's a strange kind of loneliness that lives inside people who are constantly surrounded by others, especially those who are always trying to please them. It's not the loneliness of being physically alone. It's the loneliness of never being seen, of constantly being filtered, of being tolerated but not truly known. You become everyone's favorite person but your own. This is why people-pleasing is so dangerous. It gives the illusion of connection while quietly starving your inner world. You might get attention, praise, even affection, but none of it nourishes you. Because none of it is meant for the real you. It's meant for the mask you wear. And that difference is subtle but soul-crushing. You don't need to stop being kind. You need to stop thinking that kindness means self-sacrifice, that love means overextending, that peace means silence. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes, the most peaceful act is walking away. Sometimes, being kind to others starts with not betraying yourself. This is where shadow work comes in. Jung believed that to become whole, you must turn toward the darkness within you, not to indulge it, but to understand it. The anger you suppress, the guilt you carry, the sadness you hide, the urge to scream instead of smile. These are not flaws. They're signals, warnings, proof that a part of you is being neglected. You can't heal by pretending everything is fine. You heal by telling the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if it makes people uncomfortable, even if it means letting go of people who only loved your mask. There's a cost to truth, but there's a bigger cost to self-deception. Because every time you pretend to be okay when you're not, you're sending yourself a message. My feelings don't matter. And when you repeat that message enough times, you start to believe it. That's when depression takes root. Not as a sudden collapse, but as a gradual draining. A heaviness. A sense that life is passing you by, and you're just tagging along. Pleasing others won't save you from loneliness. It won't protect you from rejection. It won't make you feel whole. Because no one else can do that for you. And the more you depend on their validation, the more power you give away. Look around. The world is full of people who feel lost, exhausted, invisible. And many of them don't realize it's because they've spent their lives chasing someone else's definition of worth. They were never taught to look inward, to trust their own voice, to say, "This is me, take it or leave it." You don't need to be rude to be real. You just need to stop lying. To others, yes, but more importantly, to yourself. The next time you feel that pressure to say yes when you want to say no, stop. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I'm honest? What am I protecting? And is it worth the cost? Because there's always a cost. You either pay it up front, through the discomfort of being true, or you pay it slowly, through the slow death of your own identity. The world will always ask you to conform, to soften your edges, to fit the mold. But if you do that too well, you'll disappear. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And one day, you'll wake up and realize that you've built a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty on the inside. You were not born to be agreeable. You were not born to be silent, small, or invisible. You were born to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from acceptance. It comes from self-acceptance. From reclaiming the parts of you that were pushed down, shamed, or dismissed. From learning that your value isn't measured by how comfortable you make others feel. There will be people who misunderstand you, who call you difficult when you finally speak your truth, who walk away when you stop giving in. Let them. Their presence in your life was dependent on your silence, and silence is too high a price to pay for temporary companionship. Jung believed that every step toward consciousness is painful, because it involves death, the death of illusions, of false identities, of comforting lies. But in that death, something real is born, something solid, something that can't be taken away by rejection, or loneliness, or disapproval. You don't need to become fearless, you just need to become honest. Honest about what you feel, honest about what you need, honest about who you are when no one's watching. The world might not reward your honesty the way it rewards your obedience. You may lose some relationships, you may be called selfish, but you'll gain something far more valuable, yourself. And once you have that, everything else starts to make sense. You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop bending, you start living. And maybe for the first time you realize that freedom was never about escaping others. It was about no longer betraying yourself to be loved. So stop performing, stop shrinking, stop pretending. You are not a mirror for other people's expectations. You are a human being, with flaws, with boundaries, with needs, with a voice. And that voice deserves to be heard, even if it shakes, even if it stands alone. Even if the only person who ever truly hears it is you. Because that's where healing begins. That's where life begins. When you stop trying to please everyone. And finally, start being real.